What is up, guys? Frosty here today for another Frosty Features. Today we have our final member that we are going to do a Frosty Feature on for the Orcus team. This is Omega Sentinel. So what this is a comic book background on the tunes that you use in Marvel Strike Force, and I am your guide through the pages of the lore, the big thing. So namely, we stick to 616 canon here, so we will reference that a little bit as we move throughout this one. According to Scopely, what this is a blog post description that is given for the character on the Marvel Strike Force website. We're going to read this and we are going to rate it at the end of the feature. So here we go. Omega Sentinel. Karima Sharpender was a dedicated Indian police officer when she was captured by the mutant hunting organization Bastion and transformed against her will into Omega Sentinel, a deadly human sentinel hybrid. Her body was cybernetically enhanced with advanced technology, granting her superhuman strength, durability, and the ability to interface with and control other machines. Omega Sentinel became one of the Orcus organization's top lieutenants, leading their sinister battle against mutant kind. We will rate this after the feature. Omega Sentinel. There's a version of her I found on Google. Name, Karima Sharpender. I'm sorry if that pronunciation is incorrect. First appearance, X-Men Unlimited number 27, all the way back in 2000. So she's been around for a while, but it's kind of funny because like she serves as like a pretty strong like kind of keystone to certain stories, but she actually hasn't been in that much. I think we're gonna cover about half of her comic, whatever. But she also spends most of her time as a hero, as far as I can tell. We'll get into it. Powers and abilities: superhuman, meaning that she is beyond all she is beyond all capabilities of human beings whatsoever. Super speed, super reflexes, etc. Proximity scanning, much like all Sentinels, they have different versions of scanning so they can find things like mutants. Omega Sentinel has a couple of additional options, things like heat vision, or excuse me, thermal, X-ray, things like that. So different types of scanning, nanite control / adaptation. So essentially very similar to Superior Iron Man's suit. She has essentially what amounts to a regeneratable types of metals that make her up. So when she gets damaged, things like that, she can kind of make it up. She can fix herself. She can also kind of mold into different types of weapons and things like that. And as she kind of goes through her life, she kind of slowly discovers these different abilities and things that she can use. She also has forms of technopathy, so she can control, or she can like hook up and control other forms of technology and things like that, kind of at whim. Aliases: Archaea and Malice, or Archaea and Malice. We'll talk about this. Omega Sentinel really is Omega Sentinel or Karima. Ultimately, what's up with Omega Sentinel is she is a human that is mostly a robot. Therefore, she gets hacked and or possessed a lot, and she is specifically possessed by Archaea and the character Malice, whom we've spoken of before in Frosty Feature, different versions of Malice, but we have talked about this one. Affiliations: Orcus. So we got this one right. She, when it comes to the actual affiliation kind of situations, we've been talking about some of the Orcus team don't necessarily fall on there. Omega Sentinel is Omega Sentinel and Nimrod are part of the Orcus storyline, are definitely a part of Orcus coming about in the Hickman kind of run of X-Men in the last few years. X-Men, she is a member of Rogue's X-Men for a point. She is part of the Sentinels, and then she also joins one of Charles Xavier's versions of Excalibur, which is pretty cool. Even those affiliations right there show you she's very much here and there, good guy, bad guy, good guy, bad guy. Very similar to maybe the Winter Soldier pre-MCU. With the MCU coming out, he's kind of swung to the hero side pretty hard. That's pending Thunderbolts coming out soon, so take that with a grain of salt. As of recording date, he's become more of a hero than an anti-hero. Background: Kolkata, Bengal. So she, Kolkata, that's where she worked as a police officer for a while. We'll talk about her origins kind of coming up. But yeah, she's from Bengal, which is cool. Who died? Can't be a superhero or supervillain without somebody dying, and you just don't have a story to work off of, right? So in her situation, it is Sanjit Shara. And we, like I said, we'll kind of get into that, but essentially she's looking for Sanjit, and she comes upon the fact that he's been turned into a Sentinel and then subsequently killed. Good guy, bad guy, good guy, bad guy. All of her plots, it seems like if you read a story about Omega Sentinel, one of the two things are gonna happen. She's either gonna turn into a bad guy and attack, or she's a bad guy, she's gonna get turned into a good guy. That's just sort of the fun fact about her. All of the stories I've ever read with her in them, which I was really trying to get the Fall of X stuff down so that I can talk about that today. That's the story. Something happens, she becomes good. Something happens, she becomes bad. That's usually the beginning and the ending of whatever plot point she's a point of. Spoiler alert, obviously. Plot performance issues. So, her powers, as I was saying before, her powers are such that she actually, as she kind of operates and moves forward, she slowly kind of understands and develops. She doesn't really develop them. She kind of discovers these new things about her that she can do. Kind of like, War Machine or something. I feel like it's in the MCU where like War Machine's like, oh, I didn't realize I had that gun or whatever. Stuff like that, right? So depending on who's writing it, as with most characters, she may or may not have access to certain powers, and even to the point where there are certain links of comic lore where her mechanics become enable and she kind of operates just as a human, right? Or slightly, we'll call her a slight meta-human at that point. So relationships. I had a heck of a time finding relationships. Neil Shara, we'll talk about him quite a bit here in a second. That's the closest thing I could find to a relationship with her. It doesn't really, we're dropped into the middle of her performing her duties as a police officer. There really is no background besides that, her being in Calcutta. And she ends up having this almost relationship with Neil Shara, but then she becomes Omega Sentinel, and that kind of gets shortchanged. And then from then on, she's either a good guy, a bad guy, or unconscious. And when she's a good guy or a bad guy, she's struggling she's struggling with her humanity. I feel like we've had a few RoboCop types on Frosty Features. She's no different. She very much is a RoboCop type, except she doesn't end up getting blown up first. That might be wrong. Let's talk about it. Notable events. Origin. How did we become Omega Sentinel? So, Karina Sharpender was a police officer in Calcutta, and in the situation, she's very skilled in combat, and she's a very successful police officer. We know this. And the police chief Shara, his son Sanjit goes missing, and his other son Neil is wanting to look for him, and he keeps telling him, he's like, hey son, stop. Like, he went missing for a reason, and it's not a good thing. You need to stop looking for him. You're gonna get in trouble. What I'm gonna do, hey, this is Karina. She's a good police officer of mine. She is now your protector, and she's gonna make sure that you don't do dumb things. And Neil's like, I don't think that's gonna work very good, Daddy. I'm gonna go do dumb things. So he continues looking for Sanjit. She tries to stop him on occasion. Ultimately, she's tailing him for a while. And what happens, and that's what you see in this clip here, is Neil gets his nose in a little too deep, and he comes across this gang, and this gang tries to jump him. So Karima jumps out of her car, and she beats the crap out of the whole gang, and that's how she meets Neil. And after her and Neil meet, they kind of befriend, they start having this sort of romantic thing, and Karima decides that instead of kind of trying to protect Neil, she's gonna help Neil find Sanjit. And this goes very poorly, because in doing so, what we find is that Sanjit was kidnapped by Bastion. So we talked about Bastion in Frosty Features Nimrod quite a bit. So Bastion in this situation was kidnapping people and turning them into Prime Sentinels. So just a very strong version of Sentinels that better and that's what you're gonna find, especially with a lot of stuff around Omega Sentinels time, around Orcus, is that the Sentinels are being changed into, this is where we find Stark Sentinels, X Sentinels, Prime Sentinels, just these very much enhanced versions of Sentinels, which we talked about, different versions of Sentinels and Frosty Features Sentinel, right? Which is amazing. So, in this situation, Bastion is kidnapping people, turning them into Prime Sentinels, and because of their meddling, they come under the purview, the sight of Bastion, and Bastion's like, yeah, we're gonna stop this. So Bastion swings in, and once again, Bastion is a fusion of Master Mold and Nimrod, right? Very, very powerful being. And these are two human beings, so they get hard kidnapped, and upon being kidnapped, Bastion starts to monologue, because villains, you know, and so Bastion's monologuing, they're strapped to chairs about to be turned into Prime Sentinels, and there's two Prime Sentinels with Bastion, and Karima and Neil realize that one of them is actually, it is Sanjeet, Sanjeet, Neil's brother, who has been turned into a Prime Sentinel, and there's a big thing of, oh no, what's gonna happen? So then Bastion's like, I'm turning all these people into Prime Sentinels, and I'm gonna take over the world and destroy all the mutants, and it's gonna be amazing. Also, I'm gonna turn y'all into Prime Sentinels. Here you go. Shot Karima, shot Neil, and then right when he goes to give a shot to Neil, so Karima's like, I got a shot. Ow, right? So that's what you say when you have a shot. And then Neil, the shot comes down, and then he's like, I'm under a lot of stress. And you know what happens to random people in the Marvel Universe when they're under a lot of stress? They turn out to be a mutant. And so all of a sudden, he explodes. Granted, he's not dead. His mutant power manifests, and he blows up the lab, and everybody dies. The Prime Sentinels are dead. Bastion's not dead, of course, because it's Bastion. But the whole lab gets destroyed, whatever. And essentially, they get to a point where it's like, oh, hey, let's get out of here. And Karima's like, hold on a second. I just got, something is going on. And she went from Prime Sentinel past, right? She completely enveloped the serum, and she becomes the first Omega Sentinel, which becomes essentially the strongest Sentinel there is, essentially. I do believe there's a debate there whether or not, I would very much consider that Omega Sentinel's on a very similar level to Nimrod, except for the human aspect of Omega Sentinel. But she becomes Omega Sentinel, and she's like, ah, shit, I'm really evil, and I can feel it. I've got programming, and I'm supposed to kill mutants. She's like, Neil, I need you to run. And Neil's like, okay, I don't know what else I can do. I'm not going to be able to kill you because you're like a Mega Sentinel or whatever, and I don't know what's going on with me. I'm going to run off. I'm going to become Thunderbird with the X-Men, and you do your thing. And she's like, okay. And that's her origin. That's how she becomes a Mega Sentinel, and Orcus starts to control her from there. And then we find multiple stories where it's she's evil because of this original Omega Sentinel transformation, and then we have she gets defeated. I'm pretty sure the first time she gets defeated, and then Magneto and Professor X, Magneto reprograms her because magic magnetism, and Professor X reprograms her because magic mental powers, and she becomes a good guy, and then she gets possessed, becomes a bad guy, comes out of it, becomes a good guy, whatever. So then we find her working with Orcus, and the way that this works, so she becomes good guy, bad guy, whatever. She's a good guy for a very long period of time. She's working with X-Men, Excalibur, etc. And then with her work for Orcus, what had happened was, okay, we're gonna go back to the same argument. I've already, on the Frosty Features, I've already pointed out why saying things are Marvel Strike Force lore is not an argument for the story to be wrong or bad, right? I've already pointed it out. There's a definitive answer on the Marvel Strike Force stuff. I talked about it. It's a thing, right? What I want to point out, we have multiple realities, and they affect each other. That's the argument, right? And that's what happens with her work with Orcus, and it's very important, okay? So, in X-Men Second Coming, which we talked a lot about X-Men Second Coming in Frosty Features Nimrod. So what we're kind of looking at today is the Fall of X, which is right after Second Coming. So in this, there is an alternate reality version of Karima that does not have an actual designation. There's not even a temporary designation. What it is it is It is Omega Sentinel Moira 10A, right? So what this version of Omega Sentinel is from a future that the mutants win. And so in most of the Days of Future Past, Nimrod, things like that, the Sentinels, the humans, however you want to look at it, they win, they oppress the mutants, and the mutants all die. A version of Omega Sentinel is from a future where the mutants turn around, the X-Men essentially join forces with Apocalypse and turn back the tide, and they essentially take over the world. And in this last-ditch effort to kind of oppress these mutants, to stomp them out, the character Enigma takes the mind, the consciousness of their version of Omega Sentinel and sends it into the past, which goes into the Earth 616 main continuity line, Omega Sentinel. And what she does is she takes over the Omega Sentinel's body, who was a good guy, good person at the time. And so it goes from heroine to villain pretty fast, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, now I'm bad again. I'm gonna go team up with Nimrod, and we're gonna do all the stuff that I talked about across the features Nimrod. So with that, they make Planet. So what she does first, actually, is she goes and she seeks out this guy Killian Devo, who was kind of working off of this blueprint paper that we talked about. That was the idea of making an organization that opposes things, which was Orcus. She goes and gets Killian Devo, and she encourages him to form Orcus, who then starts amassing resources and Sentinels and things like that, Wolverine skeletons, like you do. To make this organization. That's what X-Sentinels are. They're Sentinels with Wolverine skeletons. And with various like alternate reality Wolverine skeletons. So they're cool. Trust me. But in Fall of X specifically, we've got Stark Sentinels, which are essentially Iron Man. I mean, they're Tony Stark Sentinels, right? They're Tony Stark Sentinels, so they're real strong. Orcus is formed because of Omega Sentinel. We also are under the impression for most of the storyline that the Moira 10A version of Omega Sentinel has killed the 616 version. So that's important to note, because as we get to the point, we have the massive raids onto Utopia, which we talked about in Nimrod, and then after that we've got Sentinel City show up. So Orcus has essentially remodeled the planet Mercury into Sentinel City, which essentially is like there's hundreds of there's mother molds, and the mother molds are making Nimrods, so it's a master mold but from Nimrods. And the X-Men and Avengers team up, and they're like, we're gonna get on this Sentinel City, we're gonna take it down, and we're gonna stop this whole thing because things are getting way out of hand. And so what we see in Fall of X is this bit with Sentinel City. And essentially, when the Avengers and the X-Men team up, some real crap's going down, and both of them get onto Sentinel City, and it really is kind of a sweep pretty fast. So at the end of the day, we have Omega Sentinel driving the bus. She's trying really hard to keep Sentinel City afloat. It's being taken over, and then she ends up face to face with Nightcrawler and Psylocke. Nightcrawler being the vampire who takes place through different things, and he died in Second Coming, which is right before this, but you know how comics works. Anyway, they go head to head, and Psylocke's like, hey, I'm gonna kill you if you don't get your stuff together. And Karima's like, the evil Karima is like, I have no stuff to have, whatever. So you can go ahead and kill me. And Psylocke's got a psi knife at her head, and it's like, it's kind of a cool shot. She's got the knife at her head, and then so apparently instead of deleting the 616 Karima data that we thought had happened, she had put her in a partition, which is essentially a slot in your hard drive set to just kind of put separate things. So for some reason, Karima 616 was in this partition, and when the dagger was up against Moira 10's head, Karima takes over for just a second and stabs her head onto the dagger, which kills the Moira 10, and regular Karima comes back, which is how Sentinel City ends. and we kind of this is sort of like our ending bit of Fall of X. I didn't want to get too into that also because it is still fairly recent as far as comic publications, but it is sort of the main, that and Second Coming, which I really went over in Nimrod. Those are kind of all of the things that Orcus has done. And I think they're still involved in Messiah Complex. But regardless, that's all. What we have done now is gone through all of the stuff that Orcus has done, and still left a little bit if you wanted to catch up and read on those, because once again, they've only been out for a couple years at this point, 2 or 3. So I highly recommend reading them. There's a lot of stuff going on, but that's where you find most of. You find this version of Omega Sentinel in that arc. In the last, right now it's 2024. I think it was 2022 and on. That's this chunk of Omega Sentinel. But the thing we need to keep in mind, especially in context of Marvel Strike Force, the Omega Sentinel we have in Marvel Strike Force is not this bald one, right? This bald one, the bald Omega Sentinel, is the one that is possessed by Moira 10, right? So this is an alternate future of Omega Sentinel conscious in the Marvel 616 body. The one with the hair is the one before that goes back and forth being a villain and not a villain, and not, etc. Right? So the one that we have designed in game is actually based off of the pre-Orcus Omega Sentinel. Power level. Marvel Strike Force doesn't care much about power levels, but here are Frosty features we do. The way that this works: if you are a multiversal threat, that means you can end all of realities as realities know, not just yours, but the whole multiverse at your whim. Universal means that you are a threat to your reality and maybe could hop over to another reality and topple that on, taking them down one by one. Cosmic means you are a threat on a cosmic scale, taking out things like small planetary bodies up to something like a solar system or a galaxy, depending on the situation or how much time or effort you want to put into it. Nuclear means you have power equivalent to that of a nuclear bomb, leveling things on the small end, like small cities, all the way up to taking out something like a planetary body. Super Soldier means that you are beyond all capabilities of a human being, meaning that you have super strength, super speed, etc., taking out things like brick walls or, once again, with enough time, a city block. City means that you are a human being type level situation that is trained to the absolute and utter peak ability of humans, thinking like something like an Olympic level athlete. In the Marvel Universe, we have a lot of ninjas, secret agents, etc., mercenaries, things like that in this field. And then there's Greg. Greg is the undead Asgardian that's spawned by Hela in Marvel Strike Force, and without the Undying team to back him up, or Hela, or whatever, or power creep, however you want to look at it, Greg, left to his own devices, is it worth a thing? So, in the event that Greg and I were out watching a movie, and we were sharing an icy. Him and I have been getting along recently, and it's been really good. And we're sharing an icy, but turns out my man's over here. We're watching Captain America: Brave New World, and he starts hugging the icy, and he won't pass it over. So I punch him in his face. Right? That's what you get for hugging the icy. All of a sudden, we're tussling, we're in the front row, everybody's watching, we're the best trailer anyone's ever seen, and I come out on top because I am a regular human being, right? So for the sake of argument, due to undead Asgardian physiology, just because I like to make the argument, I, as a regular human being, could theoretically beat Greg. Greg is equivalent to that of a regular human being, and in the case of Omega Sentinel, I said it earlier, very similar power level to that of Nimrod. We don't have as much content of Omega Sentinel as we do Nimrod, so there's less to compare him to. And a lot of what she's doing is kind of discovering her weaponry. When she's possessed, that seems to be the nature of possession kind of situations in Marvel. When people are controlled by other people, their powers are much stronger because they know how to use them more. Very much thinking like Iceman being controlled by Emma Frost. So in this, when Archaea is possessing Omega Sentinel, she finds out she's much stronger than she is. And then this Moira 10, kind of a similar situation, but it's possessed by yourself from a different reality, whatever. Anyway, ultimately, in the case of Omega Sentinel, what we've been shown is that she is a nuclear power level easily. She's got things like rail guns and stuff, kind of, and she can kind of manipulate things how she wants. We haven't seen her do anything on that cosmic level. It's very possible that she's there. So my argument would definitely be that she's higher end nuclear, but I don't have any proof currently as of this recording date that she could even battle in the next layer up. So there we go. According to Scopely, this is weird, okay? Only for the fact, really quick, there's weird wording in this. I'm sure somebody has had to have pointed this out. I feel like I'm probably the only content creator that agonizes over specifically this part of the blog post, but captured by the mutant hunting organization Bastion. And I don't know if it's supposed to say organism. He has a mutant hunting organization, but this is making it sound like the organization is called Bastion, which is weird to me. It feels like a typo. And maybe it was, but this is how they make their lore, correct? So all of a sudden now in Marvel Strike Force canon, there's a Bastion organization, which I know seems like it's splitting hairs, but it's really weird and it's hard to read, which made me kind of trip over some other things when I was reading it earlier. Another thing that we have here is it's crazy because in this description, we also have the version of Karima that is before Orcus, the way it's described, right? We don't have her alternate version, her alternate future, whatever. It still sort of makes sense that she's working with Orcus, but the description is also pre-Orcus. They got it twisted. They brought in a character from, it's the character but different before she was a part of the thing. It still works with the Orcus tag, and the description's weird because it's worded poorly. So I don't know, but got it twisted. It attempts to be a pretty good description, but in the context in which they placed it, it doesn't actually make a whole bunch of sense. So there's that. Anyway, that's Frosty Features Omega Sentinel. I hope that you all enjoyed it. We'll move on to Night Stalkers next time. Let me know your favorite Orcus moments or Mega Sentinel moments in the comments, or if I got anything wrong, I'd love to hear it either way. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe this here on YouTube. It doesn't cost you anything but a couple of clicks. And as a reminder, on Sundays, 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, I stream at the link above where we do Frosty Features live. I hope that you all enjoyed this. I hope that you all have a fantastic weekend. And most importantly, y'all, stay cool.